What city will you never visit based on its reputation? Egyptians. Here we go again. Mogadishu. The State Department page for travel to Mogadishu is a wild ride. Some of my favorite excerpts. * Draft a will and designate appropriate insurance beneficiaries and/or power of attorney. Discuss a plan with loved ones regarding care, custody of children, pets, property, belongings, non-liquid assets, collections, artwork, etc., funeral wishes, etc. Be sure to appoint one family member to serve as the point of contact with hostage takers, media, U.S. and host country government agencies, and members of Congress if you are taken hostage or detained. Establish a proof-of-life protocol with your loved ones, so that if you are taken hostage, your loved ones can know specific questions and answers to ask the hostage takers to be sure that you are alive, and to rule out a hoax. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I work with so many refugee families who fled from there and the stories are chilling. I went there in 2011 as a nursing student to help out at one of the hospitals. Great, friendly people, but the state of pretty much everything was absolutely shocking. Everything was in disrepair. Tons of buildings were still complete rubble from the earthquake in 2010. Raw sewage appeared to be flowing out onto some of the streets. No traffic lights worked. Potholes were so large they'd swallow your entire vehicle, etc. Our fun time consisted of going to the UN base. There were also frequent power outages throughout the day. The entire hospital was surrounded by concrete walls that were probably 7 to 8 feet high, followed by barbed wire that was another 5 feet high and was manned by men with guns. We were not allowed to go out into the streets, ever. Some of the cases coming through there were absolutely heartbreaking. A baby died after another hospital had given it so much cough, cold meds it stopped breathing. We were also told that some of the other local hospitals did not have staff at nighttime and patients were left alone by themselves. I learned a lot and met some fantastic people though. It made me realize how good we have it in Canada. Some comments. I won't go to Mogadishu because I don't want to be skinned alive. Other comments. I won't go to Cape Cod because I hear the crab cakes aren't what they used to be. Dubai not a fan of 120 degrees with nearly 100% humidity. Enslaved labor and oil dystopia. There's a town way north of Perth where I live in Western Australia called Wittenoom, that I would refuse to step foot anywhere near, purely because of the history of it and the asbestos exposure risks. I have no idea how there are still people living there, let alone the hundreds of tourists that go through there on their travels in the north. Edit. Nice to know that the last people living there are now gone. Cairo. Apparently one of the worst places in the world to go if you're a tourist. At least, if people on Reddit I've seen complaining are to be believed. I had a horrible time with my stomach and the one camel ride I took the guy held my boob saying he was steadying me. I worked somewhat near Egypt and had a number of co-workers. We are all males and military contractors, who visited there thinking it was just a stigma about the harassing. Every single one of them said they would never go back and a number mentioned how you would have to be insane to visit as a woman. In high school I had a friend whose mom had met an Egyptian man online. After we had graduated a few months later, my friend's mom moved, from Texas, to Egypt to marry and live with this man, having never met him in person before. Nobody has heard from her since then, not even my friend whose mom it was. Edit. I graduated in 2010, so this was about 12 years ago. 12 years, and nobody has heard from her. We had a family member, older woman, do the same thing. Got off the plane in Cairo, met the guy, who immediately asked her for her money so he could put it away safely for her. He took her to an apartment where she was locked in for a few days before she was able to get out. Of course she never saw the guy again. Found her way to an embassy eventually and they sent her home. As a woman, I can confirm this. We went with a tour group, and it was still scary. On the bus ride to the pyramids, we had an armed guard on the bus, as well as armed guards in one vehicle in front of the bus and one vehicle behind the bus. I was really looking forward to seeing the pyramids and the Sphinx, but the amount of harassment ruined the experience for me. I was polite at first, but when they would block you from getting back to the group or even put hands on you, I had to work really hard to not to end up in an Egyptian prison. Save yourself the trouble if you think you want to experience the pyramids and watch a documentary from the comfort of your home. I have always wanted to go tour Egypt. But I've seen too many videos where they harass tourists for money at the pyramids. Just doesn't seem fun anymore. If you're interested in ancient Egypt, well, Cairo is not the place you should visit. You should visit Luxor. Luxor has Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens, Temple of Karnak, more 18th dynasty tombs and memorial temples than you can shake a stick at, and a few other places to visit, museums, necropolises, etc. Still very touristy, but less so than the Great Pyramids, and a lot more interesting stuff to visit. The Temple of Edfu is also just 50 kilometers away, about 1 hour drive, and Edfu has a lot of Ptolemaic ruins, so you can get a good sense of how Egypt changed with Greek and Roman influence. From Edfu you could continue east to the Red Sea coast, see Berenice, which was in ancient times one of the largest port on the Red Sea, and it also has numerous caves related to the rather mysterious troglodytes, natives that lived there during the Roman era. North of it you can find Wadi el Gamal, a wonderful national park. There are also a number of great resorts nearby for relaxing, bathing, diving. So my recommendation for Egypt is to just skip Alexandria and Cairo as much as possible. Port-au-Prince not being murdered is my favorite thing. Tip: sort by controversial to find your city. Pyongyang. If I went, I couldn't complain. Mogadishu. One friend was murdered and his murderer set free by his clan. Another colleague was kidnapped from their guest house 5 years ago now and is still missing. Will never, ever, step one tiny toe in that city, let alone the country of Somalia. Kingston, Jamaica. The saying goes, if you don't have business in Kingston, you have no business in Kingston. Edit. I have traveled to other parts of Jamaica, and the island is sincerely one of the most beautiful places on earth. I went to Kingston on a cruise once, and tried wandering off from the shopping district the cruise bus took us to so I could see the real Kingston. I got like 1 block away and this shopkeeper came out and physically restrained me from going any further, saying, "You better get back to your tour, you go any further and they're gonna chop you up." My desire to see the real Kingston evaporated immediately after that. I was a flight attendant at one point and decided to take a trip to wherever the next flight was. Ended up in Kingston solo. Jamaica was so beautiful, but I never got over how many men catcalled me. I had a random man propose to me on the beach. It was wild. Gallup, New Mexico according to truck drivers. Storytime. I live in Albuquerque and I played rugby in high school. We went to Gallup to play exactly one time. We had to walk the field to pick out glass and needles out of the dirt. It was awful. Holy shit, I spent a night in Gallup, New Mexico. All the big hotels off the exit were booked. These were the big chain kind of places like Days Inn or whatever, and I guess there was some event. We were dead tired. This was the end of day 2 of driving and we were coming from Philadelphia, so we drove down Old 66 until we found a place called the Roadrunner or some shit. I can't find it on Google Maps now. But it was $25 a night. Problem was the front desk was actually a front window and we could see the guy who worked there in the back of that room with his head down on the table, passed out. TV was on too. No amount of banging could wake him up, so we were about to leave, but a guy staying in one of the upstairs rooms called to us from the balcony. He said that guy was passed out drunk, but he'd call his brother and the brother would give us a room. And about 30 minutes later that's what happened. We stripped down to underwear and left our clothes and all of our belongings in his truck. We discussed sleeping in shifts but couldn't pull it off. Nobody stole our shit though. And when I woke up, miracle of miracle, I actually didn't see any bugs of any kind. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that completely pointless story. Good night. That stretch of NM gives me the Hills Have Eyes vibes. All of Qatar. Probably Riften. Too many sketchy people. They also have the Thieves Guild to worry about, not to mention Maven Blackbriar. Gary, Indiana. Honestly, because of the reputation I want to see Gary sometime, not to stay, but to drive through. There's just something about urban decay that I love to look at. Abandoned office buildings, old rusted blast furnaces, empty lots in the middle of downtown, it's all morbidly beautiful to me. It's the semi-apocalyptic atmosphere that does it for me. Like being able to see what the world might look like if people went to extinct. I also really like old abandoned malls for that reason. Something about a place that was once full of life and people but has now been reduced to a dilapidated rundown husk is so interesting and tragic to me. Forks, WA. Place is full of emo vampires and werewolves. For those who wish to know. Forks is an old logging town, ran by a single logging company. And much like Gary Inn, when the company left, so too did the jobs and income of the region. Twilight and its legion of fans actually turned the fortunes of that town around, and to this day they still do tours of all the places mentioned in the books and movies. If you are not a fan of Twilight, then there's not much in the actual town to see or do. But it's on the outer edge of Olympic National Park, which is honestly one of the best NPs in the entire country, so there is a reason to be in the area. Edit. Need to clear up that there actually wasn't just one big company in Forks. The industry was huge and basically the whole area was known as the logging capital of the world back in the 70s. But then the federal government made laws to protect the old growth trees in the surrounding forests, along with the rare animals that lived there, by limiting how much timber could be sold from those trees per year. That's actually what killed the lumber industry in the area. Edit 2. Also wanted to add that the Olympic Peninsula in Washington is the rainiest place in the continental USA, as evidenced by the fact that it hosts an actual, temperate, rainforest. It's the reason that Stephenie Meyers chose Forks as the setting for Twilight. Vampires don't like sunlight, after all. The story goes that she saw a list that named Forks as the rainiest city in the lower 48, but it's actually a different town on the Olympic Peninsula that holds the title. Any remaining sundown towns? I was looking up sundown towns in my state and came across one town close by. It seems like the sundown status died out, but the story they had was too funny. Brookfield, Illinois. During the 1960s, there was a big uproar when a family sold a house to a black family. It turned out, however, that there already was a black family in the town, and at a meeting called to protest this new family, a white man stood up and said his neighbor already was black. The meeting broke up in confusion. Gotta love it. We'd like to keep black folks out. Probably a lot worse than that. They're already here, Ted. Well shit. Guess we lost. Oh well, the entire town gives up on racism.